I am Kiyara Rae, 30 years old, from New York. At our engagement dinner, right after dessert, when my mother-in-law stood to toast us and instead clicked a remote, the projector bloomed to life behind her. Not a slideshow of childhood photos, my private texts, screenshots, glue and gray bubbles stitched into a parade, each enlarged for the room to read. At the top, my name. At the bottom, Ethan's replies. She lifted her glass and smiled. "Honesty builds marriages," she said. "So let's be honest." Gasps scattered like dropped silverware. My chest burned cold. On the screen glowed a message I'd sent weeks earlier after one of her jabs. "She's kind to cameras and cruel to me. Please choose us, not her." Another. "I can't keep defending myself against someone you won't correct." She had circled my sentences in red, as if grading homework. Ethan's responses, soft, vague, conflict-avoidant, shone beside them like helpless witnesses. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. Ethan lurched to his feet. "Mom, stop! Turn it off!" She only raised her palm. "Everyone deserves context," she said sweetly, letting the next screenshot fill the wall. "If she shows up unannounced again, I'm setting a boundary." People at nearby tables stared. One aunt whispered, "Oh my God." Cameras tilted up. A cousin snickered behind a napkin. My face felt hot, then numb. Then not mine at all. I could taste metal. Only later would I understand how many tiny doors had to be propped open for this moment to exist. Ethan had kept our phones on the kitchen island, unlocked. He trusted her with everything labeled family. She treated that trust as a spare key and let herself into rooms that didn't belong to her. She had printed my words onto slides like exhibits in a case she'd been building in secret. And she chose an audience. I didn't cry. I didn't rush her or argue with the screen. I watched, spine locked, as my fears were served to a room like cake. Sliced, plated, passed. In one screenshot I'd typed, "I won't survive a lifetime of being the problem in her stories." On the wall, the letters looked childish, almost soft. In my chest, they felt like bone. People think betrayal is the blow. It's not. Betrayal is the casual way the betrayer breathes afterward, as if nothing heavy has changed the air. When the last slide faded, she lowered the remote, cocked her head and said, "If she cannot speak respectfully in private, perhaps she is not ready for public vows?" Polite. Measured. Murder in a lace dress. For a moment, the room held still. Then sound returned in fragments. Glasses clinking. Someone's chair scraping. A fork chiming against porcelain like a tiny alarm. Ethan's hand hovered near mine, useless. My body remembered the oldest lessons. Stand straight, swallow, smile if you can. My mouth refused. Backstory is the map people demand when they don't like where you ended up. Here's mine. I grew up in a fourth-floor walk-up in Astoria, with a mother who worked night shifts and a father who loved from a distance. Silence was our wallpaper. I learned early to measure people by their corrections. Who shields you, who throws you forward to the wolves, who watches. When I met Ethan at a pop-up gallery in the Lower East Side, his shy laugh, his careful questions, I thought I'd finally been chosen by someone who knew how to protect what he loved. But love without guardrails is just soft traffic. When he first said, "My mom raised me alone," she's protective, I pictured quilts and soup. I didn't picture a woman who curated narratives like museum exhibits and never retired as curator. "Turn it off," Ethan said again, voice louder, eyes wet. "Mom, you're humiliating her." She tilted her glass toward me. "No, darling. She humiliated herself by writing these things." She looked around the room. "And by being unkind to a mother who only wants what's best for her son." I took one step forward. "Give me the remote." She tucked it behind her back like a schoolgirl hiding a note. "No, you've spoken plenty." A few relatives shifted, choosing neutrality the way people choose the elevator instead of the stairs. Effortless, polite, fast. The maitre d' hovered near the curtain as if decorum were a flame he might have to smother. Something inside me steadied. I didn't want the microphone. I didn't want a scene. I wanted a fact. I reached for Ethan's hand and found it cold, shaking. "Did you give her access to my phone?" I asked. His mouth opened, then closed. I left it out," he stammered. She was helping with the seating chart. I didn't think, right, I said, voice flat. You didn't, I turned to his mother. You broke the law. She smiled as though I'd complimented her earrings. Screenshots passed to a family member in the interest of truth. Don't dramatize. She knew exactly where the legal lines lived and how to dance at the edge of them. She also knew that shame frightens witnesses more than facts do. I scanned the faces. Cousins, neighbors, colleagues, strangers who'd be telling this story in their kitchens tomorrow. You won't believe what happened at the engagement dinner. In their version, she would be reasonable. I would be sensitive. Ethan would be trapped between two hysterical women. That's the art of the practiced saboteur. She writes your role before you walk on stage. I'm done, I said. Quiet, not for her, so I could hear myself. I walked to the projector table, pressed the power button until the fan whined and died, then set the remote gently beside the cake knife. The roses behind her faded back to flower. The room blinked as if waking. Ethan reached for me. Please. He sounded like a boy in a storm. I faced him, not unkind. You left the door open, I said. She walked in. You didn't stop her. That's the whole story. He shook his head, tears threading his voice. I'll fix it. You can't fix what you permitted, I answered, and the line tasted like truth cracking a tooth. I looked at his mother one last time. She'd settled into her victory, chin lifted, cheekbones bright beneath the lights. She had mistaken silence for surrender. She had mistaken spectacle for power. She had forgotten the only lesson that matters in war. The quiet person is not always losing. The quiet person is sometimes loading. I picked up my clutch, slid past the staring tables, and pushed through the door into the service hallway where the tile smelled like bleach, and nobody asked for speeches. The hum of the cooler steadied my legs. I braced my hands on the metal counter, bent forward, and let my breath find a rhythm that wasn't hers. When I opened my eyes, the hallway clock read 9:17. In that minute, I made 3 vows to myself. Vows I would keep even if the wedding never happened. First, I would never again hand a weapon to someone who'd shown me they enjoy using it. Second, I would build a life where my privacy was not a favor anyone could grant or revoke. Third, I would not beg Ethan to stand up for me. I would stand up, and he could join, or he could watch. I straightened, wiped a mascara line with my thumb, and walked back through the door, past roses and murmurs, and a mother smiling like a queen. I didn't glare. I didn't bow. I passed her the way a tide passes a rock, without apology, certain of return. The night had given me a gift I had never wanted, undeniable proof. Now I would give the night something back. I thought the explosion at the engagement dinner would be the end of it. It wasn't. It was the beginning of a siege made of whispers. After that night, she didn't call to apologize. She called to clarify. It wasn't personal, Kiyara. I just thought everyone deserved transparency. Transparency, her favorite disguise. When she said the word, I could almost see through her. At first, I tried to rebuild quietly. Ethan and I went ahead with the wedding plans. Smaller now, quieter, like I was afraid the sound of my happiness might summon her again. But silence doesn't protect you from someone who feeds on it. She found new ways to chip at me, little taps against the wall I was trying to patch. The first came through people. A cousin texted me. Your future mother-in-law said you're still figuring yourself out. Then another. She told us she's helping you learn to cook. Each message was a breadcrumb of insult, carefully placed where I'd trip over it. When I confronted her, she smiled. I only said you were modern. People twist things. Did you? I asked. Her eyes widened in that perfect imitation of innocence. Oh, darling, if you're this sensitive, marriage will be hard. She always made cruelty sound like advice. Ethan called it miscommunication. She's old school, Kai. Let it go. But old school doesn't hack your son's password to your wedding Pinterest board and delete the venue you loved. Old school doesn't accidentally send screenshots of your text to your maid of honor. No, old school wasn't the word. Calculated was, have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments. and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. I stopped telling Ethan each time she did something small. The first few times I told him, he looked pained, promised to talk to her, and returned with vague apologies that changed nothing. Then he started sighing, rubbing his temples. "You're making this bigger than it is." That was when I learned the hardest truth. She wasn't trying to separate us by shouting. She was doing it by exhaustion. She'd host dinners for family unity and serve my least favorite foods. "Oh, you used to like this," then offer seconds while watching me refuse. She'd introduce me to her friends as Ethan's wife, the creative one. "She does something with computers." "Marketing," I'd correct gently. She'd blink as if hearing a foreign word. "Right, marketing. It's flexible work, isn't it? Perfect for household balance." Every sentence was a knife wrapped in lace. The wedding itself passed like a fever dream. She wore white. Not cream, not ivory, white. When I saw her walking toward me down the church aisle, whispering to guests about how minimalist I'd gone with my dress, I realized she didn't come to celebrate. She came to compete. After the ceremony, I caught her pulling Ethan aside near the cake. "You can always annul if it gets too hard," she murmured. I heard it, even through the laughter. The words reached me like a curse whispered into the folds of my veil. In the months that followed, the small humiliations multiplied. She dropped by our apartment unannounced, inspecting our space like an auditor. "You keep it neat. Good girl," she'd say, tracing a finger across the counter as though checking for dust. She'd rearrange things while I was at work, my framed art tilted, spice jars alphabetized. The blanket I crocheted for the couch replaced with one she thought matched better. When I complained, Ethan said, "She's just trying to help." I said, "She's colonizing our home," he laughed. "You make everything sound like war." I looked at him for a long moment before answering. "That's because she declared one." I began keeping a notebook, hidden in my dresser drawer. Each entry held a date, a quote, a setting. April 12th, called my boss's wife to ask if I'm really full-time. Said she was just curious. April 30th, asked Ethan if he's sure he wants kids with me. The list grew. Each line was a stitch tightening around the truth. The thing about constant small harm is that it trains you to anticipate it. I stopped dressing up for dinners because she'd always find something to critique. That color drains you, or you've gained confidence. And maybe a few pounds. I began pre-apologizing for things I hadn't done. "Sorry if that upset you" became my refrain. The more I tried to avoid conflict, the more room she took. But her favorite tactic was pity. She'd look at Ethan, sigh, and say, "I just wish she'd let me love her." And there it was. The trap. If I stayed silent, I was cold. If I defended myself, I was cruel. Either way, she wore the halo. Once I overheard her on the phone with her sister. "Kiyara's fragile," she said. "She gets emotional when I offer advice." That word, fragile, echoed for days. I looked at myself in the mirror, wondering if I looked breakable. Then one morning I realized I was, not because she was right, but because I kept bending to prove her wrong. The turning point came one afternoon when she dropped by while Ethan was out. She brought a basket of homemade muffins, sweet enough to smell like apology. I opened the door cautiously. "Ethan's not home," I said. "Oh, I came for you," she replied. "We should talk woman to woman." We sat at the table. She folded her hands. "I know you think I dislike you," she began, "but I'm only trying to protect my son. You come from different values. What values are those?" I asked. Her smile was small. "You're ambitious, independent. That's good for a girl, but it's lonely for a wife." I felt heat crawl up my neck. "You don't get to define my marriage." She tilted her head. "You already let me define your reactions." That was the moment the fog cleared. She didn't just want control of Ethan. She wanted control of the story. Every response I gave her, anger, tears, explanation, fed her script. The only move she couldn't predict was silence paired with intent. After she left, I threw the muffins away. I washed the plate, dried it, and slid it into the cabinet like sealing evidence. I sat at the table, staring at the chair she had just occupied, and whispered, "You'll never sit there again." I didn't know yet how I'd win, but I knew the method: precision, patience, proof. From then on, every smile she offered me went into my mental archive. Every lie she told became another line of data. She was mapping a battlefield she believed was hers. I was drawing the escape route that would one day strand her on it. She thought I was broken. I was collecting her fingerprints. The next chapter of our war wouldn't be fought with words. It would be fought with evidence, and I had just started keeping score. The breaking point didn't come with a scream. It came with a subject line. I woke up to 6 missed calls from a client who paid half my rent. A 7th arrived while I rubbed sleep from my eyes. I answered, voice rough. "Hello?" A clipped voice replied, "We're terminating the campaign effective immediately. Please don't contact us again." The call ended before I could ask why. I opened my laptop with hands that already knew. My inbox glowed. We're done here." The thread was long. At the bottom sat an email sent from my address at 11:43 p.m. "If you can't approve basic concepts without micromanaging, maybe you should hire a babysitter instead of a designer. Consider this my resignation." It was signed with my name. I hadn't written it. I was asleep by 10. I checked the sent folder. There it was. My name, my address, my tone twisted into a weapon I would never choose. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat I didn't recognize. I stared at the timestamp, counting backward. Last night, Ethan and I had dinner at his mother's place. She'd hugged us goodbye, and he had stayed to help with dishes while I came home early. When I walked in, I noticed my bag moved from the chair to the desk. I assumed I'd left it there in the morning. I hadn't. I scanned the apartment like a detective who lives at the crime scene. Nothing disturbed, nothing obvious. Just a mug on the counter that wasn't mine, lipstick smudged on the rim, not my shade. I called the client back, voice steady. "That email was not from me." He exhaled hard. "It came from your address." "Yes," I said, because arguing with a fact wastes time. "Give me a day." He paused. "You have until noon." I texted Ethan. "Did your mother come by our place after I left?" He replied, "She dropped me off." "Why? Did she come upstairs?" "Only for a minute. I forgot my keys. She waited while I grabbed my jacket." "Where was my laptop?" "Kitchen. Why?" I didn't answer. I walked to the kitchen table and ran my thumb over the lipstick on the mug. I opened the cabinet where we keep glasses. My own coffee cups were stacked perfectly. The mug on the counter didn't belong there at all. It wasn't ours. I set it next to the keyboard like evidence. When Ethan got home, I didn't raise my voice. "Someone used my laptop to send an email last night." He frowned. "Are you sure it wasn't—" I tilted the screen so he could see the thread. His mother's perfume still floated in the apartment. Floral, too sweet, like a smile that stays after the lips stop moving. He read in silence. Then weakly, "Maybe you left it open and some auto-send—" "Emails don't write themselves," I said. I pointed to the mug. "That's hers." He looked at it like it might transform into a different truth if he stared long enough. "I'll call her," he said. His hand shook as he pulled out his phone. He paced while it rang. "Mom? Hey, quick question. Did you touch Kiyara's laptop last night?" He listened, nodding at nothing. "Uh-huh, right, okay." He hung up and wouldn't meet my eyes. "She says she moved your bag, that's all." "Of course she does." He reached for my shoulder. I stepped back. "She didn't just try to embarrass me anymore," I said. "She tried to kill my work." He swallowed. "Maybe we should just calm down and—" "No," I said. "Listen, stop asking me to interpret her kindly. Stop translating. She sent that email." "You can't know that," he said. And there it was. The sentence that turned damage into something permanent. I turned the laptop so the light hit the keyboard. A faint smear of nude lipstick glowed on the spacebar. I didn't smile. "I know." He stared at it, stunned by the body of a proof he never asked to see. "I'll talk to her," he said, voice small. "I'll make her apologize." The word apologize landed like a paper umbrella in a hurricane. "No," I said. "I don't want an apology. I want an ending," he flinched. "Ending what?" "Her access," I said. "To us, to me, to anything that isn't hers." I forwarded the forged email to myself and printed the thread. The paper slid out warm. I circled the timestamp with a red pen and slid it into a folder with a clean spine. I didn't know yet whether I'd use it in court, in a meeting, or just in my own mind, but I knew I would use it. Proof turns heartbreak into leverage. At 11:08 a.m., I called the client again. "I'm coming by your office with documents." The receptionist hesitated. I said, "It'll take 5 minutes." She sighed. "Come." I arrived with the folder, hair pulled back, voice even. I laid the printouts on the conference table. I was at dinner from 7 to 10. Here's my rideshare receipt home at 10:12. Here's a screenshot of my building's entry camera. Our lobby app records motions. I had pulled the clip. It showed me entering alone. Here's the email's exact sent time. I did not write it. Someone with my device did. The client studied the lipstick smear in the photo I'd taken. I didn't say whose it was. I didn't have to. He looked up. "You're telling me someone impersonated you?" "Yes," I said, and I didn't add the rest, that the impersonator was a woman who believed her son's life belonged to her. He nodded slowly. "We'll pause the termination. Send me a clean apology we can forward to the team, one you actually wrote." "You'll have it in an hour," I said. He stood, then hesitated. "Get two-factor on everything. And change your locks." I managed a thin smile. "Already done." On the sidewalk, wind slid under my coat like ice. I realized my hands were not shaking. I realized I was not scared anymore. That terrified me for a second. How calm vengeance can feel when you finally mean it. When I got home, I found Ethan sitting on the couch, phone face down. "She swears she didn't touch it," he said. "She says this is your attempt to make her look like a villain." He looked like he wanted me to save him from what his ears had heard, and his eyes refused to hold. I set the folder on the table. "This is the last day I will explain myself about her. Kiyara." "I'm done," I said, not cruel, not loud. "I will protect my work and my peace. If you can join me, I want you beside me. If you can't, I will still protect them." He closed his eyes. "What do you want me to do?" "Pick a lock," I said. "The one she thinks she owns." That night, I changed every password. I added two-factor to email, bank, socials, cloud calendar. I turned on login alerts. I placed a camera facing the door. I unsynced our shared family album and removed her access to anything with my name on it. I called a locksmith and booked the earliest morning slot. I placed the spare key she loved to borrow into an envelope and sealed it with tape, then wrote across the front, "Return to owner only." I left it on the counter for Ethan to deliver. Around midnight, he came into the kitchen where I sat with my notebook. He looked smaller than he did in our wedding pictures. "I told her she can't come over without asking me first," he said, like a child proud to carry a too-heavy box. I nodded. "Good start," he hovered. "She cried." "I'm sure she did," I said. "She said she was just looking out for us." "She was looking out for control." He leaned on the counter. "How do we come back from this?" "We don't," I said softly. "We go forward, without the parts that keep hurting us." I turned the notebook so he could see the list. Dates, quotes, places. A ledger of a year lived under siege. I kept thinking she'd tire out, I said. "She won't, so I will." "Will what?" "Stop giving her anything to use." He stared at the lipstick ring on the printed photo, then at my face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I believed him. I just didn't trust his apology to hold off his mother's next move. When he went to bed, I stayed at the table and wrote a single sentence under the last entry. "Unforgivable is when someone tries to erase your name from your own life." I closed the notebook, turned off the lamp, and felt the shape of a new self settle in the dark. Not the girl who wanted to be understood. Not the wife auditioning for approval. A woman who had finally defined the line and stepped over it. Morning would bring locks and codes and a rehearsal for the distance to come. But the real change had already happened. The story in my head had flipped. She wasn't the villain I had to survive. She was the stranger I was about to remove. There's a kind of silence that feels heavier than noise. That's what filled the apartment after I locked the doors and changed the passwords. It wasn't peace. It was a vacuum. Soundproof, airless, deliberate. The kind you create when you're done asking to be safe. Ethan walked around like a ghost in his own home. He still texted his mother in secret. I could tell by the way he tilted the phone away, by the nervous check of the screen whenever a notification blinked. I didn't confront him. Not yet. You can't fight what's still pretending to be invisible. The loneliness arrived disguised as relief. For the first time, she couldn't reach me, but neither could anyone else. Friends asked me to lunch. I said I was busy. My sister called. I let it ring out. Every conversation required explanation, and I didn't have the words yet. My mother-in-law hacked me sounds like paranoia when you say it aloud. People understand heartbreak. They don't understand invasion. The job I almost lost didn't fire me, but the damage lingered. Clients looked at me differently, measured, cautious. I could feel it in the long pauses during meetings, in the polite smiles when I presented new ideas. Reputation doesn't bleed out. It drips slowly. I was working twice as hard just to sound credible again. One night, while Ethan slept, I opened my laptop and stared at the email list of clients she'd nearly cost me. I hovered over one name, tempted to send a single sentence. My mother-in-law impersonated me. But then I closed it. Truth without evidence sounds like hysteria, and I was tired of being the hysterical one. At work, I started eating lunch alone in the conference room. Coworkers whispered, "She's quiet lately." I wasn't quiet. I was rebuilding. I was learning how to operate without validation. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. The fights with Ethan became smaller, sharper, faster. They lasted minutes now instead of hours. She didn't mean it. She didn't send that email. You're making her sound evil. Maybe she is, I'd reply. Then silence, the kind that eats at love molecule by molecule. He tried gestures, flowers, dinners, promises. But affection can't patch a cracked foundation. Each time I looked at him, I saw his silence at that dinner, his stillness in the kitchen, his unwillingness to believe me until proof left lipstick on a keyboard. Trust doesn't break cleanly. It splinters. Some nights I lay awake watching the red dot from the security camera blink across the dark ceiling. My mind replayed every moment she'd invaded, every lie, every smile. That's what trauma does. It keeps rerunning the scene, hoping for a new ending. I started therapy. The first session, I sat across from a woman with calm eyes and a legal pad. She asked, "What brings you here?" I said, "A war." She smiled softly. "With whom?" "A woman who raised the man I love." Her pen stopped mid-word. "And where's he in this war?" "Between us," I said. Unarmed, unwilling. Week after week, I untangled myself in that room. The therapist called it chronic emotional sabotage. I called it death by kindness. We mapped her tactics: isolation, gaslighting, triangulation. Words that made me feel less insane, even if they didn't make me free. Ethan refused to join me in therapy. "We don't need strangers in our marriage," he said. I almost laughed. Strangers had been in our marriage since the day his mother picked up my phone. By summer, I stopped trying to fix him. I shifted focus inward. I cleaned the apartment room by room, throwing away anything that reminded me of her. The casserole dish she gifted, the throw blanket she'd chosen, even the wine glasses from our wedding registry she insisted on upgrading. She was everywhere. Erasing her was like exorcism, but healing isn't linear. One afternoon, I caught myself scrolling her social media. She'd posted a photo captioned, "Family over everything." A dinner table crowded with faces, Ethan's empty chair beside her. My chest tightened. She was still playing the victim, still collecting sympathizers, still framing herself as the woman her son abandoned for a cold wife. I slammed my laptop shut. That's when I realized she didn't need proximity to hurt me anymore. She had planted herself in my reflexes. That night, I went for a walk through Manhattan, where even loneliness has background noise. I watched people laughing on restaurant patios, couples arguing gently at crosswalks, streetlights bleeding gold into puddles. The world kept going, oblivious. My pain didn't echo here, it dissolved into traffic. I hadn't realized how much I missed anonymity. When I returned home, Ethan was waiting on the couch. "She called me crying," he said. "I didn't ask who she was. She says you blocked her number." "I did." "She said you're trying to turn me against her." I met his eyes, You're doing that all by yourself. He rubbed his temples. Kai, this tension is killing me. Then stop feeding it, I said. Pick a side. She's my mother, and I'm your wife. The silence afterward was a chasm. He didn't answer that night. He just stood, walked into the bedroom, and closed the door. I stayed on the couch, the hum of the fridge the only sound between us. A week later, I found an envelope on the counter addressed in her cursive. To my son. I opened it before he came home. Inside was a letter dripping with manipulation. I never meant to hurt her. I only tried to protect you. She's poisoning you against your family. One day you'll see it was love. I folded it neatly and placed it on the table where he couldn't miss it. When he came home, he saw it and frowned. Did you open it? Yes, I said. So you won't have to. She wanted me to read that. She wanted you to feel guilty. She's still my mother. And she's still lying, I replied. He stared at the paper for a long time, then tore it in half. I can't keep doing this, he whispered. Then don't, I said. Stop letting her. That night, he slept beside me but felt miles away. I dreamt of standing in a glass room while she circled outside, tapping the walls, smiling, waiting for a crack. Isolation wasn't just about being alone. It was about being unheard while surrounded by people. It was the sound of someone loving you wrong, and you still loving them anyway. By the time autumn came, I had built quiet routines. Morning runs, tea instead of coffee, journaling instead of arguments. My therapist called it reclaiming peace. I called it preparing for whatever came next, because somewhere deep down, I knew she wasn't finished. People like her don't retreat. They regroup. And when she struck again, I promised myself, I wouldn't just survive it. I'd end it. Silence had protected her long enough. I realized that one morning while stirring coffee that had gone cold in my hands. The spoon clinked against the mug, small, steady, rhythmic. The same rhythm as every time she'd tried to control the air around me. That was the day I decided her quiet victories were over. It didn't start with shouting. It started with boundaries. I began with the locks, literal and emotional. I called the locksmith again and asked him to rekey the mailbox too. Had some privacy issues, I said. He nodded, didn't ask more. Then I changed my phone number, updated only the people who deserved it. My new SIM card felt like a small passport out of captivity. Ethan noticed the changes. You didn't tell me you were doing this, he said one evening, watching the locksmith gather his tools. You didn't tell me your mother still has our spare key, I replied. His mouth opened, then closed. There was nothing left to explain. By afternoon, she called him in a fury. She locked me out. Me? I'm family. He looked at the screen, then at me. Do you want me to answer? I sipped my coffee. No. Let her learn what no access feels like. He hesitated, but didn't argue. That was progress. That evening, I sat by the window with my notebook, flipping back through the ledger of her offenses. Each entry felt less like a wound now and more like data. I realized I'd stopped writing in anger. I was writing in preparation. The next page wasn't for remembering, it was for building. My therapist had said, power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's paperwork. She was right. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. I opened a new document and titled it, Restoration. Under it, I started listing steps: financial independence, legal consultation, evidence archive. Revenge didn't need to be violent. It needed to be airtight. The first thing I did was secure my business. I filed trademark paperwork for my freelance brand and moved all accounts into a private LLC. No more joint access, no shared passwords. My income would no longer sit in the same space where his mother's voice echoed. Ethan tried to be supportive, but he still moved like a man divided. I don't want you to hate her, he said one night, sitting beside me in the dark. I don't, I said. I don't feel anything for her anymore. That's worse than hate. He exhaled. You're shutting everyone out. I'm shutting her out, I corrected. The rest can knock if they want in. He looked at me for a long time, as if searching for the version of me that used to soften his world. That woman was gone. The one in front of him had no use for softness. Weeks passed. I worked, I healed, I planned. Her silence was suspicious. It wasn't retreat, it was reload. Then one afternoon, the email came. Subject: to all family and friends, an important truth. She had CC'd everyone from our wedding guest list, her church, even Ethan's co-workers. The email began, I don't like airing private matters, but as a mother, I must protect my son's name. Paragraphs followed, crafted, manipulative, polished like a press release. She accused me of emotional instability, of severing family ties, of financial deceit. Every line designed to sound reasonable until it wasn't. I read it 3 times, pulse steady. Then I opened a folder on my desktop labeled Documentation. Screenshots, messages, the forged email. Her voice recordings from voicemail. Thinly veiled threats disguised as motherly advice. Every piece of evidence ready like dominoes. When Ethan came home, I turned the laptop toward him. She did it again, I said. He scanned the email, his face draining. I'll tell her to take it down. She won't, I said, but I will make sure everyone who received it sees the truth. That night, I drafted my response carefully. No insults, no emotion, just facts. Dear family, since my name was publicly mentioned, I am sharing verifiable information for transparency. Attached are copies of the unauthorized email sent from my account, police report number 4981, and messages confirming the breach. I wish this situation required less evidence, but some lies only collapse under weight. Kiyara Rae, I didn't send it yet. I let it sit in drafts overnight. Revenge tastes best when patience seasons it. The next morning, I clicked send. The delivery confirmation felt cleaner than any argument I'd ever had. Hours later, messages poured in, some shocked, some apologetic, some silent. But one reply stood out, from Ethan's aunt. We always suspected she went too far. I'm sorry, Kiyara. That single acknowledgement dissolved months of invisibility. When Ethan saw the replies, he rubbed his face and said, You didn't have to involve everyone. She already did, I said. I just changed the narrator. He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, as if realizing what it meant to live beside a woman who no longer needed to beg for belief. Days turned into a strange calm. She went quiet online. No posts, no messages. Her friends stopped reaching out. I heard through family that she was taking time off church. The queen had lost her court. But my revenge wasn't about ruining her. It was about reclaiming me. For the first time in a year, I went out alone. Central Park at dusk, wind brushing against my sleeves. The city hummed, indifferent to my battles, which made it the perfect witness. I sat on a bench and breathed without armor. I didn't need to explain. I didn't need to prove. I just was. Later that night, Ethan said softly, You're changing. Yes, I replied. I'm remembering what I sound like when I'm not defending myself. He nodded, eyes wet. I want to change too. Then start by believing what's in front of you, I said. That was the first real conversation we'd had in months. It wasn't healing yet, but it was human. The next morning, I received a voicemail from a blocked number. Her voice, small now, cracking under its own echo. You didn't have to humiliate me, Kiyara. You won. I didn't delete it. I saved it. Proof of finality, I whispered into the quiet apartment. No, I didn't win. I survived. Because revenge, I learned, isn't always about destroying someone. Sometimes it's about ensuring they can never rewrite the story again. That was the day I stopped being quiet, and the sound of my silence ending was louder than any scream she'd ever used against me. I never imagined revenge would feel like bookkeeping. But once the public evidence existed and the locks were changed, the next stage of my life required the boring, steady work of construction. Legal forms, financial separation, careful conversations recorded and filed. People expect dramatic scenes and stories about getting even. They don't think about ledgers and receipts, but those small, relentless details are the scaffolding that holds a final collapse together. After Chapter 5's emails and the family fallout, I stopped performing anger. Instead, I built structures that made her manipulations impossible. I opened 3 separate accounts under my business name. I moved clients to new contracts that included clauses for account security and data protection. I scheduled a meeting with an employment attorney to discuss harassment and privacy. I kept copies of everything in 3 places: my hard drive, a secure cloud, and a printed binder under my bed. Evidence is not vindication. It's insurance. Ethan watched most of it with the stunned silence of someone watching a house be renovated without his permission. "You didn't need to escalate to lawyers," he said once, uneasy. "I needed to protect my life," I answered. "There's a difference." He didn't press it. He was learning, slowly, what protection looked like when it didn't involve emotional placation. I also made my private life private. I changed passwords, yes, but more importantly, I built routines that didn't leave gaps for her to slip into. No more shared devices left unattended. No more joint accounts where she had the spare key. I blocked her from family calendars and created a new one for important events that only we and chosen friends could see. I stopped posting details of our schedule. If she wanted to destabilize our life, she now had to work much harder than before. But the main work was not outward. The main work was quiet. Retraining my nervous system. Teaching myself to sleep deeply again. To trust that the world did not collapse if I didn't explain myself. I went back to therapy, this time with documents in hand. I reviewed timelines with my counselor. Every visit, every dinner, every text that had shifted the ground beneath my feet. Sometimes the sessions were technical: how to speak in court, how to preserve metadata. Sometimes they were human: how to stop apologizing for existence. There was a strategic side, too. She had been a community person. Church friends, neighbors, social groups. Her power came from being perceived as the reasonable one, so I stopped arguing directly with her allies. I began speaking to them as if they were neutral information channels. If a friend relayed a story she'd told, I would answer with facts, not outrage. "She said that? Here's what actually happened." Soft tone. Clear evidence. People who had been willing to believe the halo began to wince at the data. One Saturday, I hosted a small brunch for the women from Ethan's neighborhood circle. No fanfare, just coffee and scones. She was not invited. It felt petty until 2 of them said quietly, "We were surprised by her email." They confessed how uncomfortable they'd been. It was not a dramatic conversion. It was a soft erosion. The more I presented calm proof, the less room there was for the polished narrative she favored. Have you ever had to make peace strategic instead of emotional? It's a funny trade. You give up performance for permanence. On the legal front, I met with an attorney who specialized in privacy breaches and defamation. We discussed cease and desist options, restraining parameters, and what constituted repeated harassment. I didn't want court if I could avoid it. The last thing I wanted was more spectacle. But I learned that the very threat of formal consequences can be more effective than yelling. When she realized there were papers lined up, the tone of her messages shifted from smug to careful. I didn't send anything public, yet. I let the quiet weight of readiness press on the edges of her confidence. I also rewired our money. I insisted that invoices for our home projects be sent to my business account, and that all shared bills be split into clearly documented transfers. Money, it turned out, had been another avenue she used. Small, helpful deposits, offers to pay for things, loans disguised as kindness, each created strings. I cut them. Freedom in practice had line items. Meanwhile, I found leverage in unexpected places. One of her old friends worked at the local paper and reached out, confused about an email she'd received. When I answered him, calm, factual, offering copies of the forged message, he admitted that several community leaders had been receiving versions of her narrative. I didn't go public then. Instead, I quietly asked him to keep an eye on the pattern. Information does things on its own timetable. It seeps. At home, I groundly changed the choreography of our marriage. Instead of pleading for corrections after an offense, I started requesting it before the next offense could occur. If she calls you in the middle of work, you tell her no, I instructed. If she shows up, you tell her you're busy. Simple lines, simple enforcement. He did it badly at first, half-hearted, apologetic. But he learned the language. Enforcement is not cruelness, it's boundary maintenance. There were nights I sat with my notebook and mapped possibilities. I imagined scenarios, her lawyer, a smear attempt, a dramatic scene at a party, and wrote the steps I'd need to respond to each. Preparation made me unshakable. There is a humility in planning for your enemy's imaginings. There is also a kind of ruthless clarity. Reprisal loses its glamour when you've already written countermeasures. My revenge was never about vengeance for vengeance's sake. It was about building a life where her keys could not open any door that mattered, where her words could be met with receipts and not tears, where our marriage had its own guardians besides the woman who had been his first teacher in control. One winter morning, after months of quiet work, I received a text from a cousin who used to bow to her mother's narrative. "We've been talking. We see it now. Sorry for not believing you sooner." I read it 3 times. It tasted like triumph, but not because of humiliation. It tasted like validation. Not noise, not spectacle. Confirmation. I kept building. I kept filing. I kept my voice measured and my evidence easy to access. I stopped handing her the raw material of reputation, access, information, excuses. There were days when it felt clinical and empty, no big reveal, no movie moment, just the slow accretion of safety. She noticed, of course. People notice when their room is suddenly empty. Her calls became fewer. Her social media flourished with innocuous posts, the sort of performative piety that used to comfort her friends. But the places she once entered with ease were closed. She tried to enter through others, mutual friends, but I had preemptively built trust elsewhere. There's a secret women learn in these quiet wars. The best victories are the ones that make the aggressor irrelevant. You don't have to humiliate them. You have to make their methods stop working. One evening, as rain clattered on the windows, Ethan and I sat side by side with cups of tea that had cooled. He reached for my hand without drama. "I'm proud of you," he said, like someone admitting a hard truth. "I'm sorry I wasn't the guard you needed." I felt the years of small injuries press, and then, slowly, ease. I squeezed his fingers. "Then be the guard now," I said. He nodded. The scaffolding we'd raised, legal folders, bank statements, password lists, wasn't romantic. It lacked drama. But when next she tried to open a door she no longer could, it would be because of the quiet things we did. The slow building that had nothing to do with shouting and everything to do with surviving. That is how revenge taught me to be patient. Stone by stone, file by file, I took back my life. The day the truth finally struck wasn't planned like a heist. It unfolded like gravity, inevitable, quiet at first, then unstoppable. Months of preparation had turned me into someone new. Calm on the surface, precise underneath. I had built boundaries, legal files, a network of quiet witnesses. All that was left was to let her reveal herself. I didn't have to drag her into the light. She would walk there herself. It started with an invitation. Her church was hosting a charity luncheon, one of those polite social events where reputations were currency. She'd sent out announcements all over Facebook, honoring strong family values. I didn't plan to go, but the night before, I received a message from Ethan's aunt. "You should come. People still think she's the victim." It wasn't revenge that made me agree. It was clarity. People needed to see the difference between her story and mine, and I didn't need to say a single lie to do it. When I arrived, the room hummed with conversation, sunlight cutting through stained glass windows. She was at the podium in pastel silk, smiling like she'd never weaponized a day in her life. She didn't expect me. When she saw me at the back of the hall, her face froze for half a second, then reassembled itself into hospitality. "Kiyara," she said brightly into the microphone. "How wonderful of you to join us. Everyone my daughter-in-law." Applause scattered through the crowd. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. I smiled. Happy to support family, I said, my voice clear enough to carry. She blinked. That wasn't the script she'd written for me. During the luncheon, she worked the tables, shaking hands, whispering. I could tell from the glances who'd been fed her side of the story. Poor thing, their eyes said. Her son's wife turned him against her. It almost made me laugh. Almost. Then came the part she couldn't resist, her speech. We live in a time, she began, when family bonds are tested by pride, by misunderstanding, by people who forget where loyalty begins. My phone buzzed in my bag. A message from Ethan. Are you sure about this? I typed back. It's already happening. I didn't interrupt her. I just recorded. Every self-righteous word, every veiled jab. Some people, she continued, build walls instead of bridges. But a true mother never stops loving. When the applause ended, I stood. Can I say something? I asked. A ripple moved through the room. Her smile faltered. This isn't really... Just a minute, I said, since it's about family. I stepped forward, not to the podium, but to the projector table near the stage. My hand didn't shake as I connected my USB. The same kind of remote she'd once used against me. Her color drained. The screen flickered to life, her own voice from an audio file I'd saved, dated months earlier. If she really loved him, she'd know her place. I raised that boy. She's just borrowing him. Gasps filled the air. Then another clip. A voicemail she'd left for Ethan the week after the forged email incident. If you don't wake up soon, she'll ruin your name. I can fix this before it's too late. I looked up at her, calm as glass. You told people I was unstable. You forged my emails. You sent messages under my name. But unlike you, I don't need rumors. I have proof. The room was silent except for the low hum of the speakers. Her mouth opened, then closed. This is an ambush, she hissed. No, I said. This is accountability. You taught me it's important to be transparent. Ethan entered then, late, breathless. He saw the screen, the frozen faces, his mother pale behind the podium. He looked at me, really looked. And in his eyes, something finally broke. The spell she'd held over him for years cracked open. She did this? He asked quietly. I didn't answer. The recordings did. He turned toward her. Mom? She tried to smile, hands trembling around her glass. That's out of context, sweetheart. She's twisting. He cut her off. Stop, please. His voice shook. You've been lying for years. I let you convince me she was the problem. People began to murmur. She looked around, desperate, searching for allies. No one met her gaze. The queen had no court left. I think, I said softly. That's enough. I pressed stop. The screen went black. I turned to the crowd. If you ever believed her stories, I don't blame you. She's good at them. I used to believe them too. Then I looked straight at her. But I'm not her story anymore. I unplugged the USB and walked toward the exit. Behind me, applause started. Hesitant, then building. I didn't look back to see who started it. Outside, the air was crisp. I felt light, not triumphant, not vengeful, just free. Ethan followed me out. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, you didn't tell me you recorded her. I didn't need to, I said. You needed to hear her without me explaining. He nodded slowly. I heard her. For the first time in years, he wasn't defending her. He wasn't defending anyone. Just listening. That night he called her. I sat beside him, not to monitor, but because truth deserved witnesses. Mom, he said, voice quiet but firm, we're done. Don't come by. Don't call. If you try to contact Kiyara again, you'll deal with legal notice. She cried, begged, accused me again. He didn't waver. I heard you, he said. You did this to yourself. He hung up and placed the phone face down. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then I whispered, "It's over." He looked at me, eyes tired but certain. No, it started over. For the first time in years, I believed him. The next morning, I emailed the recording to my lawyer and then deleted every backup except one copy sealed in a cloud vault. Not out of fear, out of finality. Revenge done right doesn't need replays. She went quiet after that. Her church friends stopped visiting. Her Facebook page turned private. Rumors fizzled. The same people who once whispered about me now whispered about her. Sometimes I caught myself pitying her. The woman who built her identity on control until there was no one left to control. But pity wasn't forgiveness. It was perspective. Ethan and I started having dinners without tension again. We'd sit at our reclaimed table, the one she used to criticize, and eat in the same silence that once hurt, but now healed. Revenge hadn't made me cruel. It had made me whole. And as I closed my notebook that night, the last line I wrote was simple. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it plays your enemy's voice back to them, and lets the echo finish the work. In stories, the fall is loud. In real life, it's the softest sound. A chair pushed back from the head of a table no one is saving anymore. After the luncheon, after her voice played into a room that used to obey her, the city didn't change, but the rooms she ruled did. The next Sunday, Ethan's aunt texted me a photo of the church bulletin. Her name, once printed under hospitality chair, was gone. Replaced by interim committee. No statement. No grand announcement. Just absence doing its work. I stared until the letters blurred, then put my phone down and breathed like someone took a hand off my throat. People reached out in small ways. A neighbor knocked with a plant and said, "For peace." A former family friend sent a single line. "I'm sorry I believed the performance." My therapist called it social recalibration. I called it relief. Ethan moved differently. Not louder, not defensive. Just present. He answered fewer calls, refused ambush visits, and returned her gifts unopened. When she sent a long message about forgiveness and biblical hierarchy, he replied, "Boundaries are not betrayal." 4 words. A gate installed where a revolving door had been. I didn't watch her pages, but people told me what mattered. She set her account to private. She posted verses about suffering. She hinted at persecution, the usual choreography of someone trying to keep a crown without the weight. But crowns require believers, and her audience had shrunk to a circle so tight it cut. I saw her twice. The first time in the produce aisle, a cart between us like a truce no one signed. She reached for a lemon she didn't need and said, "You ruined my reputation." I looked at her hands. No ring, polish chipped. "You recorded yours," I said. "I only pressed play." People are cruel. People are tired. The second time was outside the church. I waited for Ethan, who'd met with the pastor to set holiday boundaries. She stepped onto the steps, saw me, and stopped. I felt the second she considered a scene. Then she kept walking. That, more than any apology, closed a chapter. Consequences didn't all wear public clothes. Some arrived in letters. Our lawyer sent a notice. Cease harassment, no defamation, no contact with my clients. 1 page, 3 paragraphs, a signature. The quiet gravity of a door that only opens from one side. I cleaned my life like a house. I donated the last items she'd given us, the casserole dish that supervised our dinners, the throw blanket that tried to make our couch hers. I scrubbed the walls, not because they were dirty, but because I wanted to touch the home I'd fought for. Then I opened every window and let the city in. Have you ever felt your nervous system unclench? It's not fireworks. It's the stillness that doesn't feel like waiting anymore. Work recovered. The client she'd almost cost me extended our contract for a year. Another referred me and added, "I admire how you handled that mess." I didn't tell them admiration felt stranger than pity. I just sent the invoice and did the work. Ethan and I rebuilt without speeches. We set a rule, no discussing her after 9. We replaced the couch she hated with a bright, generous thing that took up space. We hosted friends and used the good plates for ordinary pasta. When Reflex made me look at the door around the time she used to drop by, I'd catch Ethan catching me, and he'd say, "No one's coming." Her circle kept shrinking. The charity she'd chaired rotated her off the roster. A neighbor said she'd skipped 2 book clubs. At first I wondered if this was cruelty. Then I realized it was math. You can only spend so long spending people before they change currencies. One conversation helped more than I expected. Ethan with the pastor. They sat on a bench under the sycamore, voices low. I heard only the end. Honoring your mother doesn't mean obeying her dysfunction. The pastor's voice was gentle, firm. I saw in Ethan the look of someone finally learning a language he should have learned as a boy. At home, he asked, "Do you need me to apologize again?" I took his hand. Not again, differently. From then on, his apologies were verbs, calling out disrespect in real time, protecting our plans, deleting her as emergency contact, adding me instead. He started therapy on his own. He returned her spare key with a note. This doesn't open anything anymore. The pedestal didn't shatter. It eroded with each boundary. Sometimes I felt a pang. Grief not for her, but for a version of our life where a mother could have been a mother. For holidays that could have been soft. For grandchildren she might never meet, because she chose control over connection. Then grief passed, and relief filled the space it once hoarded. A woman from church, kind, direct, asked to meet for coffee. She'd believed my mother-in-law for years. We sat by the window and she said, I was wrong. No excuses, just that. I cried in public for the first time since the engagement dinner. Not because I needed her validation, because truth finally reached the place where lies had lived rent-free. I didn't plead my case to her friends. I didn't need to. The reckoning was public, not because I dragged it there, but because she had. I curated what she created and let the crowd decide whose story could stand without props. As autumn folded into winter, our nights became ordinary. We cooked, we planned a trip, we left our phones elsewhere. When the first snow came, I stood at the window and watched the city blur. The world looked new, not because it had changed, but because I could finally see it without her shadow. One last letter arrived near Christmas. Handwritten, careful. I don't know how to live without the place I had in his life. I'm sorry for what I did, though I still believe I meant well. If there is a path back, tell me what it costs. I sat with it for a long time. Then I wrote a sentence below hers and mailed it back. It costs accountability you have never paid. I don't know if she'll ever pay it. That's not my work anymore. The pedestal stood empty. The room felt bigger. And when I walked through our door each night, I didn't brace. I finally belonged to my life again. After a storm, the silence is suspicious. The first weeks after her letter felt like that. Days so still I almost didn't trust them. For years, my body had been tuned to her chaos. Without it, my pulse didn't know where to rest. Ethan and I lived in that quiet like people learning to breathe again. We stopped whispering. We stopped flinching when the phone buzzed. We learned what dinner sounded like without tension. Plates, forks, laughter that wasn't forced. I'd forgotten how ordinary peace could feel. One morning, I woke up before him and walked through the apartment barefoot. Sunlight was coming through the blinds in gold lines. The air smelled like coffee and freedom. I realized that for the first time in years, every object in the room was where I'd left it, not where she thought it belonged. That's the small truth about recovery. You start to notice the details again. I kept the letter she'd sent, folded, unread since the day I mailed my reply. It wasn't forgiveness. It was record-keeping, proof that even her surrender came with conditions. She wanted to be mourned, not accountable. I didn't mourn her, but sometimes, late at night, I thought about the little boy version of Ethan who had been raised on her kind of love. Tight, suffocating, conditional. It made sense now why he froze instead of fought, why he thought silence was safety. I used to blame him for not protecting me. Now I understood. He never learned how to protect himself. We talked about that once, sitting on the fire escape with tea. She taught me that love meant obedience, he said. You taught me it means trust. I looked at him, half in shadow. And you? I'm still learning, he said. That was enough. Have you ever realized that survival changes your definition of love? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. The world didn't stop for our healing. Bills still came, deadlines still pressed, but everything felt sharper, realer. At work, I designed my best campaign yet, raw, honest, personal. My boss called it career-defining. It was about reclaiming identity after being silenced. Art had become my translation of rage. Therapy turned from emergency triage to rebuilding. My therapist asked me one day, "What do you want your story to do for you now?" I said, "End," she smiled. "Then you're ready to start something else." I started teaching workshops for women who'd experienced relational control, how to set boundaries, how to document harassment, how to reclaim narrative. The first session had 5 women. The second had 20. Each time I saw myself in their stories, the disbelief, the guilt, the slow awakening. I told them what I wish someone had told me. You don't need to prove cruelty for it to count. You only need to stop accepting it. Ethan came to the third workshop, sitting quietly in the back. Afterward, he said, "I finally see what you carried." I smiled. "No, you're seeing what I built from it." We started traveling. Short trips at first, then longer ones. In Paris, we sat in a cafe not unlike the one where she'd first declared war. I caught my reflection in the window. Older, steadier, unafraid. Ethan reached across the table. "Do you ever think about going back?" he asked. "To her?" He nodded. "No," I said. "But I think about how easily I could have become her." He frowned. "You're nothing like her." Maybe not, but control is a disease we all catch when we're scared. I just learned to treat mine. He squeezed my hand. Outside, someone laughed, a sound as bright as glass breaking in sunlight. I laughed too, and it didn't hurt anymore. Back home, her name came up less and less. Months went by with no letters, no messages, no sightings. One afternoon, Ethan got a call from her lawyer. She'd sold the old house and was moving south. He hung up and exhaled. "That's it," he said. "That's closure," I corrected. The end was years ago. The day she left the state, I walked to the park with my notebook. The same one that used to hold evidence now held sketches, ideas, beginnings. I flipped to the last empty page and wrote, "She lost control. I found freedom." Then I tore out the first 10 pages, the records, the pain, and fed them one by one into a small flame in the park's stone grill. Paper curls turned to ash. The air smelled faintly of ink and victory. Revenge had done its job. Justice had finished its shift. What remained was living. Ethan joined me as the last page burned. He didn't ask what I was doing. He just said, "Feels lighter here." "It's supposed to," I said. We watched the smoke rise. Both of us silent, both of us new. Later, back at home, I packed away the binder of legal documents and recordings into a box labeled closed. I didn't throw it out. Some things you don't destroy. You archive them to remind yourself what you survived. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought of the girl I used to be. The one who whispered promises to herself in a bleach-scented hallway. The one who learned to fight with evidence instead of screaming. I wanted to tell her it worked. That one day, she'd walk freely through rooms no one else controlled. That her quiet had never been weakness. It was strategy waiting for sound. Peace doesn't announce itself. It slips in through small things, the steady hum of a safe home, the laughter that doesn't echo off walls full of secrets, the absence of her voice in our daily life. That absence wasn't empty anymore. It was space. I didn't forgive her, not in the storybook sense, but I let her fade. Letting go is its own kind of revenge. It proves they no longer matter. When people ask now, "Whatever happened with your mother-in-law?" I just smile. She taught me a lot, I say, mostly about who I never want to be. The pedestal was gone. The stage was gone. But my life had begun to play a new song. It's strange how quiet the world becomes when you finally stop expecting another battle. For years I had lived on edge, waiting for the next manipulation, the next lie, the next disguised act of cruelty. But now the silence wasn't absence. It was presence. It filled every corner of my life like light finally seeping through curtains I hadn't realized were closed. We didn't hear from her again after she moved. Not a call, not a letter, not a message through someone else. For months that felt impossible. I kept half expecting her shadow to reappear, through an email address I didn't recognize, or a rumor whispered through a cousin. But the noise never came back. She was gone, and I was left to understand what freedom really meant. Freedom wasn't fireworks. It was small, consistent breaths I didn't have to measure. It was waking up and not flinching at the sound of the phone. It was cooking dinner without wondering who might show up uninvited. It was looking at Ethan and seeing a man, not a battlefield. He had changed too. The guilt that once dragged at him had softened into accountability. He no longer needed me to remind him where the line was. He kept it himself now. When we talked about the past, it was without tension, two survivors comparing scars. One night he said, "She'll probably tell her new friends a different story." I smiled. Let her. Stories are all she has left. He reached across the couch and took my hand. Do you hate her? I thought about it. No, hate is still a kind of attachment. I outgrew her. The next morning, I wrote in my notebook for the last time. Not a list or an account, just a message to myself. You were not crazy. You were conditioned to doubt what you saw, but you saw it. You survived it. You rebuilt everything she tried to break. I closed the cover and slid it into the same box that held the evidence. The letters, screenshots, transcripts, photos. A time capsule of pain and proof. Not for revenge, not for use. For remembrance. Because forgetting would mean pretending it never happened. And I owed myself honesty more than I owed anyone peace. Months passed. Seasons shifted. We took a trip to the coast that spring. Our first real vacation without ghosts tagging along. The ocean stretched endlessly, blue and quiet. I stood with my feet in the cold water, feeling the tide pull at the sand around my ankles. Every wave that touched me felt like a tiny erasure, not of memory, but of fear. Ethan came up beside me. You look happy, he said. I am, I said. Then I laughed, because it was true and strange to hear myself say it without hesitation. We talked about starting over somewhere new, a house closer to my studio, maybe even children one day. The idea used to terrify me. I'd been afraid of repeating her. But the truth was, cycles only continue when no one names them. I had named mine out loud. I had broken it. Back home, I started turning my experience into something larger. The workshops grew into a small community program. Women sharing stories of boundaries, of leaving, of healing. I called it the Quiet Strength Project. The irony wasn't lost on me. My silence had once been used against me. Now it was my signature. One evening after a session, a young woman came up to me and said, "You make revenge sound like freedom." I smiled. It is if you do it right. It's not about hurting them. It's about no longer letting them define what hurts you. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. Life went on. Ethan found new peace in distance. We rebuilt our marriage into something gentle, sturdy, mutual. We laughed more, argued softer, loved better. For the first time, I stopped thinking of myself as someone who overcame. I was simply someone who lived. One afternoon, I opened the last email from her that I'd never deleted, the one that had almost destroyed everything. I read it once, calmly, like reading an old newspaper headline. Then I pressed delete, a small act, but final. The screen went blank and I felt lighter than I had in years. That night, as the city lights flickered through our windows, I whispered a final line into the quiet. She doesn't get to live rent-free in my mind anymore. Ethan turned to me. Who? No one, I said, smiling. Peace doesn't roar. It hums, it stays. It builds new walls that don't shut the world out but keep your center intact. For the first time, I wasn't protecting myself from her. I was protecting my peace for me. That's what justice looked like in the end. Living a life she couldn't touch, and a story she no longer controlled. When people asked what happened, I'd say, she taught me to listen to my instincts. When they asked if we'd ever reconcile, I'd say, you don't reconcile with fire. You learn not to walk into it. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too deserve respect and unconditional love. Because sometimes the peace we earn isn't loud or cinematic. Sometimes it's just the sound of our own laughter returning to a room that used to echo with fear. What about you? What would you do if the person who tried to destroy your peace had to watch you live it anyway?